company has been started by an IITian, and that's going to be our next speaker, Pervinder Johar, the CEO of Blume Global. But really, he's a lot more than just that, a CEO of a startup. He's actually a serial entrepreneur with 4 startups under his belt. He's a supply chain technology leader and innovator, and he has worked tirelessly for the good of the industry with an eye towards transforming the supply chain. He has worked with large enterprises like HP. He was a VP at HP, working directly with the CEO at that time, Mark Hurd. And what's most meaningful is how the solutions that he has developed have laid the foundation for an enduring, sustainable transportation landscape. I always think of Pervinder as a person who has a giving DNA. He's been a huge supporter of IIT and our Bay Area organization, and he's an alum of, any guesses? IIT Roorkee. Yes, go Roorkee, yeah. And he and his Blume Global team have a booth on our Explore floor. As you walk out of this room, the first booth out there is Blume Global. So if you get a chance today, go visit them and learn more about what they do. Now, joining the CEO of Blume Global, Pervinder, is Rohini Chakravarthy, who will be moderating this conversation, which is a fireside chat. And to introduce Rohini, she's the managing partner at New Build Venture Capital. And prior to that, she was at NEA. And she's on multiple boards, and she's also nurtured a few startups. So the entrepreneurs amongst you, you know who to go talk to. She's also led leadership roles at enterprises like Intel, Capital, and Cisco. And Rohini's had her MBA from Sloan, the MIT, and she's got her MS from Case Western. And guess where she got her BTech from? IIT Madras. So big hand for Pervinder and Rohini. And yeah. And so sit back and listen to this dynamic conversation between these two. And they will be really sharing this really exciting journey with us. And the journey will take us from the halls of IIT Roorkee to where Pervinder is today and how he's transforming this entire supply chain landscape, and also into the future, how he is going into investments and all. But I'll let them tell the story. So join me in welcoming both Rohini and Pervinder Johar.
Good afternoon. Hope everybody had a great lunch and great campus mixer. It's been a wonderful conference so far, and I'm delighted to kick off this afternoon's programs with this conversation with Pervinder. Pervinder, maybe we'll just start with what Deepti just said. I think your journey has been one of resilience and reinvention. This is the topic of the conference. So maybe the first question, maybe you can tell us a little bit of your story about where you started.
Sure.
Go back to IIT Roorkee because we have a very enthusiastic support crew here. And what got you into startups and supply chain? Maybe that first part of your journey, that would be great.
Absolutely. So first of all, it's great to be here. And I do want to kind of give a shout out to Deepti. Right? So Deepti kind of has done a great job. So can we give a big hand to Deepti one more time? So my journey, I think there are 2 of my batchmates are here. Right? So they're probably familiar with the Roorkee time, but I probably was not the most punctual class-going student at Roorkee.
You're starting at 2:20, yeah.
I had more things going on outside the classroom than in the classroom. So I was the captain of the debate club. I was the cultural secretary. I think I was president for SPIC-MACA. So I had more things going on outside of the computer science classroom at that time. So the journey was kind of more well-rounded than just studying. Ended up in US, but ended up in probably one of the most complex technological part, which was building control systems for nuclear power plants. So my early years were kind of all focused on that. How do you go build a very distributed environment for control system? Got married, was living in Pennsylvania, and my wife did not like Pennsylvania, so I ended up in Boston kind of from that point. Worked for Fidelity and State Street Bank before doing my first startup, which was in the payment space. And this, if you guys remember, 96, those of you who are around, we used to get our kind of pay via check. So that whole movement that happened on payment with ACH payments and wire, that was kind of my first startup was on fintech side. Good exit kind of in there, still had not turned kind of 30-ish or so. So getting your first exit kind of at that time was good. So decided to do second one. And second one was with a professor from MIT, Dr. Yoshi Sheffi. We took him out for a year of sabbatical, and we formed logistics.com, which was the original kind of SaaS company in the space from logistics perspective. The name is cool. Again, ended up selling that company as well. So that is part of Manhattan Associates. So I stayed with them for a few years, continuing to run the business till I ended up at HP. And again, HP was a global role. Kind of, we were 126 billion in revenue, 66 billion in supply chain spend, and my job was to take 10 billion a year out by using technology across the world. Right? So it was a very large, complex one. And I think they were all kind of accidents, right? So the reason I ended up at HP that I knew Mark Hurd for a while before that too.
This was after Manhattan Associates.
This is after Manhattan Associates or so. And then I think at Manhattan, the story was Walmart was our customer, then Dell was our customer, and then HP became a customer. So in the end, Mark was that you have to be on the other side instead of just doing software, go see kind of what it really means.
Actually, how a supply chain works. Yeah.
And it was eye-opening, right? So I think we'll tell you a story. Walmart has been a long relationship. So we hired a person who was 25 years at Walmart in supply chain. And now he's part of Blume. And it was a similar experience I had when I went to HP, that what Walmart does or what Amazon does is not supply chain at all, right? So his name is Tim, and he's back to that unless you do manufacturing and you're figuring out how do you do global distribution and global other components that, if you don't begin to understand the complexity of supply chain. Left HP when HP was splitting, did another startup, so as a CEO for a supply chain planning company, primarily focused on AI and ML at that time for forecasting. Sold that one as well. So you guys are getting the theme kind of there. So sold it, kind of got on kind of couple of boards for large companies. I think we sold those companies as well, and then started kind of Blume in 2018 early on. At that time, there was no name, right? So the company started off with figuring out what we are going to be, what the name is going to be, and it's a complex space. So my first investment request, kind of when we worked with our investor, was $100 million for R&D. So that was kind of how we started the company. So it was not, there was no seed, there was no series A, B, C. It was straight kind of that we need $100 million to go invest in building a platform for the next 50 years, and which is what we have done now. So we are on our 6th year. We sold the company to Vice-Tech earlier this year, and I think, Rohini, it seems I've been talking more to bankers and doing road shows in the last 6 years. In the last 6 years, it's been 3 exits as a board member and 2 exits kind of as a CEO. So it's been
amazing. So
any of you want to talk about how do you go work with any of the bankers or the road show and other? Looks like I've become an expert at it now.
That's awesome.
Versus just supply chain side of it.
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing because I think the first conversation we had this morning with Jensen Huang and some of the folks from NVIDIA was this constant learning. The core thesis was how over the last 30 years there have been a learning organization. And I think in your case, you've been learning through all of these different experiences. Maybe you can kind of dive deeper on with Blume Global, which was a SaaS platform, it's a software company. what was your idea? How did you kind of think about what you wanted to build? And what did you see as missing in the supply chain landscape? And this is pre-pandemic, so and I'll ask you if anything changed during the pandemic, yeah.
I think the core concept was, like when we set the company up, there were three fundamental goals for us. One was, how do you take $1 trillion of cost out from the supply chain ecosystem by using technology and by getting more efficient? And we are well on our way, right? So if you think of it, most people did not really talk about supply chain before the pandemic, but it's logistics itself is about 12% of GDP around the world. I think US is more efficient at around 9. India is still at 14, 15% of GDP is being spent on logistics. Supply chain broadly, if you look at all other spend, you get to about 20, 25% of GDP is associated with supply chain activity.
Yeah, all the way from first mile to the logistics.
From the raw material.
Raw material.
So think of it, supply starts with the raw material. So when I was at HP, we were the largest buyer of plastic pellets. So that's what goes into foundry to make a printer's cover. So that's where the supply chain starts, or gold or titanium, or there's so many materials in high tech, all the way to the end consumer getting something. So first goal was take $1 trillion out, and how do we go do it? Actually, we had our own thesis, but we got BCG to validate it at that time that it will work well. Second one was environmental impact, right? And I think we have equivalent goals on the CO2 emissions, the reduction of empty miles, how do we leave the environment to be a better place than where it was that second goal. And the third, which was probably the most important goal, is that many people have worked on supply chains from the view of large companies, but the supply chain runs on the back of very small businesses.
Right.
It's the very small trucking companies in US, small trucking company in India and in China and in Thailand and other. And then we said that we're going to democratize technology for them and give them technology for free. So where we stand now, 6 years later, there are about 100,000 companies on the platform in 131 countries. We took the company from 0 to about 100 million in booked ARR. We'll probably get to that revenue number, recognized revenue number this year. But that journey was again focused on those three tenets. Optimize it, take the cost out, do much better for the environment, and improve the lives of many small businesses around the world. And they get software from Blume for free. And so they don't pay anything, but they still have a full operating platform to go run their business.
Yeah, no, I think, so there was this comment that Jensen made about efficiency, how electronics, generally talked about the electronics industry thriving on efficiency in all forms. Don't waste time, don't waste product, don't waste resources, don't waste power. Applying that to the supply chain, in your view, where is supply chain today? Like in terms of the inefficiency within the supply chain, right? And then maybe tie it back to your insight around how do you use software to actually make it more efficient. I think that would be an interesting insight for people to hear.
So I think the first thing is that the word chain is not meaningless in supply chain. So inefficiency comes when companies do not work with each other. Right? And I think if you think of it, no matter who the company is, they have to collaborate with many other companies to build products, distribute products, sell products, on that. And I think for decades, we had application companies, right? And then they did applications or infrastructure pieces, but the word has really moved to now platforms, right? So Bytech, Blume, it's a platform now with many applications which are getting opened up. But the core of the platform are two aspects. One is the network, how many companies are participating in it, is it directly correlated to how efficient your supply chain is. And second is data, and on data it almost is that in supply chain, everyone should be interested in the data others have, because your own data is useless to you. Right? And I think that's
just your own data is not sufficient. Yeah.
It's not only sufficient; it's kind of it's more meaningless. Like so, from that perspective, so there is a ton of efficiency still possible, and I think we'll continue to evolve. We have many other aspects of it. Right? So if you think of scope 3 from environmental perspective, it is a big impact on supply chain. Cyber security kind of is again a big area of focus within supply chain because the global infrastructure. So there's a lot more to go do kind of on that side, and I think it will probably continue for next kind of hundreds of years, not only for the next 5 to 10.
Yeah, everybody needs their stuff. Yeah. So I think I think you also mentioned that in your view you actually gave away the software for free to a number of people, and so can you talk about the business model? Like, so what was Blume's business model? Who got software for free and who paid? Like, how did all that work?
So I think our model was kind of the two companies in one, right? So when you're trying to get to kind of millions of businesses, right? So we are at 100,000, but we want to get to millions of businesses. You cannot do your traditional kind of sales models for enterprise software. So that company or that part of the company looks very much like that. How do you grow an ecosystem, right? Even when we name the company, so the Blume stands for a blooming, growing, organic ecosystem. The spelling Blume is the German spelling for Blume. Right? So if you're in Germany, you will probably see many flower shops, which are all called Blume kind of on that site. So it's the same word, different spelling because we want it to be global and international to begin with. Right? So on that side, it was that how do you go and build an ecosystem and how do you go with partners to get kind of those large businesses. And eventually it will be a freemium model to some extent. We have not monetized it yet, right? But we do own all the data. So I think if you think of the data which was missing was the data that these small businesses have, right? And I think as part of the...
And how do you share that with, how do you monetize?
And we monetize it kind of on the other side of it. And the other side is traditional software model, right? It's a software recurring revenue business. I think the days of subscription models are also over, right? So it is pay as you go, right? Because many of the companies have funded themselves by having this subscription model that I will get yearly subscription upfront. What we have done now is that there is no upfront money. Like, so zero cost for you to start off with. There is an implementation. You're going to pay only when you go live, and as you go use it, which is a disruptor kind of from a business model perspective for almost every other software company that is there in supply chain today. And I think if you think of our largest customer now, just for Blume, I think we've crossed 10 million a year in revenue. And our smallest customers don't pay anything, right? But overall, the ecosystem continues to do well.
That's amazing. Yeah. Did anything change during the pandemic? So what happened? Was it good, bad? We heard a lot about supply chain disruptions. How did you experience it at Blume?
I think it's normal, right? So all of you who have been kind of a CEO or a startup CEO in particular, you have to kind of react. So the first reaction for us was also that kind of it's going to be different. In the end, kind of, it made supply chain a household name. And so for the first time, we had politicians talking about supply chain. Now US government is working on this thing called Flow initiative, right? So all of that came out of it. That kind of it made it relevant from that perspective. And we just were ahead of the time because the products we had is the products kind of everyone needed. By the time kind of the company came along. I think I have to tell you kind of the fundamental thing that we did. We were talking about data. All of you know kind of Google Maps, but there is a Blume Maps because there was nothing that you can go out today and figure out how many ocean terminals are there in US, right? So most of the people who work in supply chain, they call Port of LA and Port of Long Beach. There is no such thing.
Yeah.
Those two are government authorities. Kind of there are a number of kind of terminals there. So we built this thing called Blume Maps, which now is every point, every location in the world, how it is interconnected on that side. And that value, and the reason I bring it up in pandemic, Blume Maps tells you that at a particular terminal in Long Beach, are you going to be on time or not? How much is the delay? Just think of it as the Google Maps. All of us, we use it. We use it before we start moving.
Traffic there, yeah.
But not during, before, right? Before is when I want to know how long will it take me to get to my destination. So it's the same thing, kind of there's a map capability that how long will it take you from lead time perspective. And then all other things that go with it. But pandemic, kind of right after that, everyone was interested in Blume Maps because they were finally figuring out that what a port looks like.
Exactly. Yeah, no, and we certainly, I think there's a lot more to be done actually on location and real-time data there.
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll just switch to AI, which is part of the conversation today. And I think when we were preparing, you made the comment that supply chain was the place where AI kind of had a lot of initial applications. Would love to kind of hear through your journey, maybe give some examples to people on where AI is applicable in supply chains today, like where is it already used, and then we can talk about where the new technologies might go in.
Absolutely. So I think kind of one thing which kind of I still remember that kind of we had only classes that I actually ended up using out of computer science were all around operations research, right? So that old traveling salesperson problem, the old bin packing, that how do you go do the suitcase, and what we do today, those problems of computer science are core problems of supply chain that we're dealing with. And when you look at AI, you broadly break it up into 3 different type of kind of technologies which are involved in supply chain. The first one is always been about forecasting, right? So when you think of machine learning, when you think of other aspects of looking at probabilistic behavior and what would happen, kind of has always been that kind of all forecasting techniques by definitions look at patterns. By definition, look at how those patterns are going to evolve, what the consumer behavior is. Now things have changed over time that we can sense it much quicker now. But kind of there's one area of AI and ML is kind of around planning, and on planning it is kind of all around the forecasting component of it. The second area is on sequential decision making. And if you think of supply chain, because things are unpredictable kind of to go begin with. So if you go back to kind of dynamic programming or your NP complete problems, right? Those are again the roots of that area. There's a book written by Professor Powell from Princeton, and then I've known Professor Powell for a while. He was involved on the early one, and he actually talks about the evolution of the techniques being used in supply chain from kind of 1980s when he was working on how do you design a terminals to now, right? And that whole area is still area around dynamic programming, which has now evolved into reinforcement learning, right? You're still dealing with that, and when something is moving from point A to point B, it goes through many nodes, it goes through many schedules. All of them have uncertainty, right? And when you're trying to combine them together, so that's the area around reinforcement learning, and then that will continue to be kind of, and I think the broader area is again sequential decision making, right? Because you make one decision, then second decision gets impacted by it. Is the second area of it. And the third area has been more on the generative AI and kind of the large language models and languages within kind of supply chain, right? So if you think of global trade, customs in every country is different. And then if you're working on it, we generate a lot of documents. And we generate a lot of documents. Language is always an issue, right? So if you're trying to see what is really going on with an import into China or export out of China versus out of Malaysia or any other countries, those are always evolving. So there's a lot of generative AI applications now kind of on global trade. There are a lot of generative AI applications on generating a plan, and I think that's where these two things kind of come together. That is possible. Cyber security is another area, and then applications of AI on it, right? So and I think cyber security takes a different meaning in the context of supply chain. Right? If you think of a chip being made somewhere, or memory being made somewhere, and it's moving through kind of many points before it gets to the end consumer or end business, you have to make sure that it is secure. Right? And I think there are
we
so
have
many more
already
steps.
had some incidents in the supply chain, both in terms of infrastructure getting attacked and so on.
Yeah, lot of them.
Yeah.
So it's a ton of applications, but I won't look at kind of just AI. I would break it down because these are big problems, right? So think of whether I'm doing kind of forecasting type of problems, generative, what am I generating, what needs to be generated, what needs to be recognized, kind of in there is the second area, and then third is the sequential decision making, and all three of them have applicability.
Yeah, it's the where's my stuff problem in supply chain. So you have to be able to say, predict where it is and see where it is. What about like computer vision? Like, so do you see applications for computer vision, voice within the supply chain? Like where, if you had to kind of
absolutely
put a pin on where you might expect new use cases, where do you see that happening?
So I think the first one has been all of the robotics and autonomous warehouses, autonomous terminals, autonomous driving. So if you think of it, they're all kind of like the supply chain or logistics in particular is a heavy user of computer vision from that perspective. I don't know if any of you have gone to, there's a terminal called LBCT, Long Beach Container Terminal. There, when a truck comes in, it's heavily automated now, right? So it's kind of, there are very few people, there are 8 people sitting somewhere in the tower, and they think everything operates. Even something as simple as kind of when you have a container sitting on a chassis, right? When you're picking it up to go put it at a ocean vessel, there's a computer vision application now which goes, including a laser, to see that kind of, can you see if it is completely detached or not? Because if it's not completely detached, it's going to pick up the whole truck as well, right? So it used to be a person, sitting there, that how do I go look at it? And so there are a ton of applications even on the automation side. My view is that on warehousing, there used to be something called warehouse control system, which was robotics, and warehouse management system. These two things are going to converge because the control systems is where a lot of this automation is becoming part of, to the point that you won't need a warehouse management system.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's great. We just have a few more minutes left. Maybe I want to come back to your journey with Blume. So you said you would, give us an insight into, you've had a lot of experience with bankers and so on. So maybe give us the last part of the journey. How did the WiseTech transaction come about? It's a great victory for having gone through that whole long journey with Blume. Would love to get your views on that, as well as what is ahead for Blume? Like, where do you see growth coming from for WiseTech and
So I think for all of these exits, kind of, especially this one is a bittersweet to some extent, right? Because I think there was so much more room to grow, and I think we were on a path to be $1 billion of revenue, which many software companies don't get to, and that path has not changed. Now it's just going to be part of WiseTech, and I can't say too much anymore because we are a public company, right? So I can't talk about kind of as a whole, but at Blume, we were on a good path. The founder for WiseTech, Richard, and I met about a year and a half back or so, and we were just trying to do a partnership, but it somehow became that the visions were very aligned. Kind of, these are complementary things today. WiseTech now, I think, I don't know what the stock price is today, but it's what, 15 billion market cap company, public company, US dollars, 20 some Australian, the second largest company on Australian stock exchange. So there's a lot of data available which shows that we'll continue to grow well on that side. For me personally, I think in addition to kind of the Blume, and it will get announced probably in a month or so. So we started a venture studio for supply chain. We're going to incubate about 10 new supply chain companies, and it is over the next 3 years. It is a studio model, not a venture model. So it's not that kind of we do it, kind of, and then the difference, if you guys are not familiar with it, it is back to that it's our idea of what we want to go build, validate it, and then there's a process around how do you go validate it, hire an EIR, kind of get the funding and get the company started. So it's already been funded well, right? So I think we can do our first 10 or so startups in the supply chain space, and more to come on it. But I think areas are going to be similar to what we just talked about. They will be in cybersecurity and in planning and kind of all other aspects of it. Probably will not be the same as Blume, because that has been played, right? So it's going to be something new. Because many times kind of you can copy something, but it's very hard.
Yeah, it's
these are all new.
Yeah, it's reinvented, yes. Yeah, no, I think maybe we have a minute to go. I think what would be great is, like, we have a number of people in the audience who maybe come from the software world, and increasingly I think people are inspired by the opportunities available in supply chain, and I see this in my venture practice every day. Like, so if you are counseling people who worked in software in other areas and they're looking at supply chain, what are some words of wisdom for entrepreneurs going into supply chain today?
I think one, it is a complex space, right? So it's not easy space, right? So I know kind of there are companies in the Bay Area which have said that they will never get into, and these are very large companies, I won't say the names, right? Even the famous CEOs have said we are never going to get into supply chain because it gets too complex too quickly. So I think it has to be that if you like complexity, if you want to go make an impact, and majority of the work that happens in supply chain is purpose driven, right? So when we talked about kind of even Blume, there was a purpose behind it, not just the financial purpose, the environmental purpose, the purpose of what you're trying to go do. So first one for me is going to be that it's not a place to go make a quick buck. It's a place where you want to really build your career in it, and then it takes a long time to go build it. Applications are everywhere, and then applications are from US defense, relies on supply chain. And it's a big part of it, and there are companies who can go do that part too. And it is kind of from anything as simple as what we buy at our house, or this water, how it ended up here. They're all, it's everywhere, right? So it's a broad field, but do it only if kind of you want to be kind of you are internalizing that this is something that I want to build my career on.
It's a long journey, the next decade or so. Well, thank you, Pervinder. This has been amazing. Congratulations on a great founder's journey. You're very generous and humble, and you've stayed true to your authentic self throughout your journey. Thank you for that, and we will hand it over to the next session. Thank you for your. Thank you to the audience for being here right after lunch and hearing our story here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rohini. Thank you, Bhagirath.
Thank you.
That was very informative. Thank you very much. Thank you.